So hi everybody, really good to see you all here. Thank you so much for your time today. My name is Justine and I basically take care of students and all of Griffith kind of work in North America. So thank you very much for joining me today. We're going to be talking about medicine. We actually have two pathways into medicine. So you can come into medicine as a graduate from a degree in Canada, or you can come in directly from high school. So we'll cover both options because the second part of the program will be applicable to all of you. So let's start off with some general information about Griffith first of all, before we get into the program specifically. So Griffith is a university that is ranked globally. So it is a very well-known university. It is currently ranked in the top 2% of all universities worldwide. And that's a pretty big achievement for any university, but particularly for a university that is so young. So Griffith was only really founded in the 1970s, but already, we've grown quite a reputation in terms of research and teaching. So again, as you can see there on the right-hand side of the slide, I refer to teaching excellence. So Griffith is actually the most cited university for teaching in Australia, so the most awarded. So that's pretty impressive, but research, as you can see there in the centre, is also very important to us. So we try to balance good teaching with good research because, of course, good research informs teaching, which is very important, particularly for those of you who are looking at programs in the health sciences. The other thing about Griffith, I think that's particularly important to point out is in regards to the stars there in the middle of the slide, we do have a 5-star rating for employability amongst our graduates. So that's really important for Griffith. Right across our programs, you will see that there is work integrated learning built in. And certainly, obviously, for programs like medicine, there are lots of opportunities to undertake clinical rotations and different types of clinical rotations as well. Oh, hi, DJ. Maybe I met you at SFU. Good to see you again. Okay. So let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about Griffith in terms of numbers. So sometimes people don't realise how big we are. We do have just over 50,000 students, which initially sounds like a lot, but when you break it down, we actually do have 6 different campuses, 5 physical campuses and 1 digital. So we don't have 50,000 students all on one campus. So there's certainly a lot going on campuses. There are enough people to make it feel like, it's a vibrant sort of place to be, but it's not the type of university where you walk in and you think, oh my gosh, this is just like a little city, nobody's going to know who I am. So definitely not that. I think it's actually a really good middle ground. You kind of have everything that you need, everything you want, a really, interesting campus, lots of interesting people from all over the place, but you still get a lot of personalised attention as well. So as you can see there, not quite, almost 20% of our students are international students from over 130 different nationalities. So again, really interesting, really multicultural campuses at Griffith. We have over 200,000 graduates, and a lot of those graduates are actually Canadians. So we've been working pretty, in a more dedicated sense, I would say, in Canada since the early 2000s. So we have graduated thousands of Canadian students at this stage. And we do have over 200 degrees, which I will talk about a little bit further about later on. But of course, you guys are primarily interested in health sciences and particularly medicine. So that's why we're all here. So just to give you an idea of our location, because a lot of people, kind of know Australia, they might know Sydney, Melbourne, sometimes Gold Coast, but they don't necessarily know exactly where those places are. So if you look at the map here, we're up here on the East Coast, but northern East Coast in the state of Queensland. and Brisbane is our capital city. And so we've got campuses in Brisbane, and then we also have one here on the Gold Coast. Now, I should point out that Brisbane and the Gold Coast are only actually an hour drive from each other. And aside from driving, of course, there is public transport between the two cities as well. So whichever one you happened to end up at, you would still be spending quite a lot of time at the other city, most likely. So Brisbane, we actually have 4 campuses in Brisbane. So we have Nathan and Mount Gravatt, which are actually located in a national park opposite each other. They're only really separated by a road. We have South Bank, which is right downtown in the centre of Brisbane, and that is really our cultural kind of creative arts campus. We have Logan, which is kind of like on the outskirts of Brisbane, kind of between Brisbane and the Gold Coast. And it's very focused on things like social work and education. And then the Gold Coast campus, Gold Coast and Nathan are pretty much the same as each other. Gold Coast has a few more programs than Nathan, but they are the 2 biggest campuses. In fact, until recently, Nathan in Brisbane was the biggest campus. The Gold Coast has now overtaken that. And of course, we have a large digital campus as well. So a lot of students around Australia and across the world are studying with us online. So life in Queensland is pretty good. If you're looking for somewhere to spend a long time studying the longer program like medicine and potentially doing your residency in Australia as well, it's definitely a great place to look at. We get over 300 days of sunshine a year in Queensland, and particularly in southeast Queensland, where Brisbane and the Gold Coast are located, there's really no such thing as winter. So certainly by Canadian standards. So yeah, you can certainly look forward to good weather, nice warm climate, pretty much all year round. So in terms of population, so I think this one is slightly out of date. Brisbane is now about 2.5 million people, again, the state's capital. Gold Coast is a bit smaller. It's averaging around 600,000 people now. The only thing to keep in mind with the Gold Coast is that it is a tourist hub. So you will, at certain points of the year particularly, you'll feel like it's much bigger because there's just people coming in all the time. Both of the cities do have good public transport systems, and all of our campuses are located on those public transport lines. And when I say on those lines, I mean the bus stop, the tram stop, whatever is right inside the campus. So you don't even have to walk anywhere. So it's pretty convenient. So this gives you a bit of an idea of exactly where the Gold Coast campus is. So our campus is located in the area of Southport. If you've heard about the Gold Coast, you're probably most familiar with Surfers Paradise. You can see over here in the background. So that's the other good thing too. The public transport at the Gold Coast is so good that you don't have to live on campus, or you don't have to even live close by to campus. If you live somewhere on the tram or even the bus line, it's really easy to get to campus within about 20 minutes maximum. So if you were living at Surfers Paradise, for example, and coming into campus, you'd be there in about 20 minutes on the tram. And you can see here that we have the Gold Coast University Hospital located right on campus. And then there's another private hospital here as well. So for medicine, a lot of your initial rotations will be done very close by. The other thing to point out here is the Griffith Health Centre, this building here. So this was a purpose-built centre. It's pretty new, was built in about 2012 and is really got state-of-the-art facilities. And that is where all of our health students will pretty much start if they're on the Gold Coast campus, which most of you will be. I'll explain that in a minute. And yeah, just a few pictures here just to give you an idea. And this is Brisbane. So this is downtown Brisbane. It's located there on the Brisbane River. You can see that one. So over here, this is where our South Bank campus is located. So if you're at this campus, you'll pretty much be probably staying somewhere down here, downtown. So you might be walking across the bridge or grabbing the ferry. You can also get bus and train. So pretty much everything goes to that campus. And then if you're in undergrad medicine, you may be on the Nathan campus as well. So this is the one I mentioned earlier. This one and Mount Gravatt, the two campuses are actually across the road from each other and both located within a national park, which is pretty cool. You can see that here. There's obviously a lot of trees around, but this is the type of campus too where you're quite likely to run into things like koalas, wombats, lots of birds and interesting lizards and things like that. And this is downtown Brisbane. This is South Bank. This is right near that, the Griffith South Bank campus. It's a man-made beach. So we don't have a real beach, but we do have a man-made one in Brisbane. And of course, because it is a river city, there's lots of water activities available to you. So I'm not sure if you're all familiar with Griffith's trimester system, but a few years ago, Griffith moved from a semester to a trimester system. So this basically gives students, most students, a little bit more flexibility in the way that they take their program. Trimesters 1 and 2 are the only ones that are compulsory for international students. So trimester 3, depending on your program, you may be able to take some courses in trimester 3, but trimester 3 is not compulsory, and there'll be a lot of programs that will not run in this time. But there are also a lot of others that do. So sorry, this picture's a little bit wonky, but this will give you a little bit of an idea. So just to give you an idea of what things look like. So if you were starting our trimester 2 this year, you'd be looking at basically an orientation in late June, and then you'd be in your teaching period from July to October with exams to follow. Then trimester 3 comes in October, and you go through pretty much until early February. And then trimester 1, which unfortunately is covered, that's kind of the most applicable to you guys because you would be starting your programs in trimester 1. But trimester 1, if you just think the Australian calendar runs on a academic calendar runs on a normal calendar year. So normally for undergrad medicine, you'd be starting your trimester 1 in February, and the grad entry, a Doctor of Medicine portion will normally start in January because you guys go through a special medicine orientation. All right, so let's get into talking a bit more about medicine specifically. So as I mentioned, Griffith has the big Griffith Health Centre on the Gold Coast campus, fairly recently built, amazing facilities. The other interesting thing about where Griffith is located on the Gold Coast is that it's part of the Gold Coast Health and Knowledge Precinct. So as the years go on, more and more infrastructure is kind of built around that. Even more organisations and businesses related to health come in there. So we are a young-ish medical school, but we're also ranked very highly in areas of allied health. So we do have a lot of background in programs outside of medicine, and obviously medicine now as well. The program's been running for quite a number of years now. So let's just have a look at the study areas. So obviously for you guys, you're probably primarily here for medicine, I would hope. But again, these are just some other areas that you may want to think about. So yeah, sometimes students will look at both medicine and dentistry at the same time, or, you know, other programs like physiotherapy, speech pathology, sometimes if you're coming in as a grad entry student, lots of different opportunities here in the area of health. I'm just going to show you a quick video. Just excuse me a minute while I switch over. Quick video here about health at Griffith.
Griffith Health is not in the business of standing still. The medical and allied health environments are constantly changing.
The students at Griffith University get hands-on in clinical and research level equipment in their undergraduate training, and this is almost unique.
Our curriculum is evidence-based, is research-informed, and is cutting-edge.
Facilities at Griffith are state-of-the-art. That makes for a better experience.
This filters through to what we do here in the research labs, where we've got extremely high-end equipment.
But one thing that the students have in common is their need to participate in our Foundation Health Year, where we have our baseline subjects that we can give them a strong foundation.
Because it's such a large tertiary facility, we see such a wide variety of cases, and it's very broad experience in the types of emergency presentations.
It's really interesting working with the doctors and the pharmacy students, the physios and the exercise physios, all that sort of holistic health. It's not just the one component.
Studying at Griffith, where I know dietitians, I know pharmacists that study there as well, it makes it much more pleasant and much easier to collaborate with them, all for the benefit of the patient.
Because in the health sector of the future, the ability to work in a team-based environment, spanning and crossing disciplinary boundaries, is going to be absolutely critical to delivery of healthcare. But the other thing that we have here at Griffith is that we're well connected and co-located with a major hospital.
The integration of knowledge between being taught in the classroom setting and then applying that knowledge right away into a practical setting.
We have that really unique link of being able to bring clinician and the student close together.
Access and work with practitioners in state-of-the-art facilities that really develop their learning in an applied setting.
They don't just provide us with academic support, they also provide us with life advices for us to grow as a person in future.
It was hard work, but it all paid off. It was a great experience at Griffith.
They definitely need to be motivated and committed.
Who knows, I might go back to university and specialise at a later stage.
I chose Griffith mainly because it's very multicultural, but generally I love the people here and I would never choose any other university other than Griffith.
Okay, so we're going to start off talking about the Doctor of Medicine. So this is obviously the grad entry program. So for students who have completed an undergraduate program in Canada, this is the program that you would be looking to come into to complete your medical education. So this program is a 4-year program. And as I mentioned before, the intake for this program is always trimester 1. So you'd be coming in basically in January 2021, if that's the intake that you're looking at. In terms of fees for this program, you're looking at about $69,000 per year. This is Australian dollars. At the moment, the Canadian is a bit stronger than the Australian, so it would be slightly less in Canadian dollars. So approximately you're looking at around about $276,000 for the entire 4-year program. So in terms of applications for this program, for the 2021 intake, they're actually looking at currently at delaying the application deadline for this one. So they had originally made it a little more around the middle of the year. Now they're looking at probably around July, maybe even August. But normally, yeah, you're looking at about 6 months prior to when the trimester or the program starts, and that is your deadline for application. You can, of course, submit your application earlier if you want to. So if you have your results and you're ready to, give your transcript to KOM and everything's good to go, you can submit your application a little bit earlier. Sometimes they will conduct the interviews a little bit earlier, usually any time between June and October. So for international students, we take about 30 per year. So there's normally about 30 places. You are not competing against Australian students. They compete separately against each other. So you guys are really just competing with international students and a lot of Canadians. Obviously, Canada is an area where we do get a lot of applicants for this program, but you'll also get, also find in your classes, you'll have students from Malaysia, Singapore, the US, parts of Europe as well on occasion. So, and I should mention too that the classes, you'll all be together. Sometimes students ask me whether there's any kind of, separation when it comes to international and domestic students at the class level. No, you will all be together. You'll basically move through as a cohort. So the students that start with you in first year, you guys are going to become pretty close as you move through those 4 years together. So in terms of entry criteria, so we're looking for you to have completed a bachelor degree. Now, Griffith works on a 7-point scale. So normally our minimum would be a GPA of 5 out of 7. For Canadians, we don't talk about scales because everybody has totally different scales. So basically admissions likes to break it down to a percentage. So we're looking for about a minimum 76 average. That's across the entire 4 years of your undergrad program. So I know that some universities will discount the first year. We don't do that. We look at all 4 years. Okay, so 76 average is not super duper high. Sometimes students are a bit surprised by that. Basically the philosophy for Griffith, and particularly the medical school, is that we want students who we know can handle the workload. So a 76 average shows us that you can handle the workload, but we're also looking for a well-rounded student. So we don't just want students who are super book smart, but then, can't work in a clinical situation under pressure or can't communicate with people. So having a well-rounded student is important to us. Now, the other way that we look, obviously, for whether you can handle the program is by looking at the MCAT score. Griffith is a little bit different from some universities that look at your total MCAT score. We don't look at that. We look at the score per section. So you must have a minimum 123 per section. Obviously, the higher the better, makes you more competitive. Also, your MCAT scores cannot be older than 2 years at the time of application. Okay, so keep that in mind. If you are taking the MCAT score multiple times, MCAT test multiple times, just make sure that, you hand in a result that is no older than 2 years. So that's the academic side. So basically the GPA and the MCAT scores are put together to come up with your academic score, which basically makes up 50% of the entry requirement. The other 50% is the interview. So the interview is very important because, as I mentioned, we're looking for well-rounded students, and we need students who are basically good at communicating with other team members, good at communicating with patients, and so on. So in terms of the interviews for medicine, these are all conducted via Skype. So nobody's flying to Australia for an interview. This will definitely be done via Skype for all international students. So there's no disadvantage in any way. And as I said, these interviews could be conducted anytime from June to October. So in terms of the actual interview itself, it's part kind of MMI style interview and part personal interview. So they will ask you some situational type of questions. but at the same time, they also want to get to know you a little bit as a person. The good news with Griffith interviews is that they're mostly done on a one-on-one basis. So you're not going to be dealing with a panel. It will be you and one of the medical professors. This is mostly because all of our medical professors are still practicing themselves. So they are super duper busy. And yeah, it's just really hard to get all of them like a full panel in a room at once. So I think that's kind of good news for students. I think it's a little bit easier to deal with, you know, those type of application interviews if it's one-on-one. So that's the way that will go. So in terms of curriculum, basically, years 1 and 2 of the 4-year program, you'll be mostly on campus, but you will have a few clinical placements. So you'll be doing health in the community, and you'll also be doing some hospital-based clinical training as well. You do a lot of your early work as well before you get into full-on clinical rotations. You'll be doing a lot of simulations in the health centre at Griffith. So it's a very... In general, the program is very interdisciplinary, and you'll be doing a lot of simulations where you're working with students from other health fields. So you might all be working on one patient, like a simulated patient situation where you've got, you know, you're the medical student, then there's, you know, pharmacy student, you know, nursing student, there might be a physio or somebody else in there. So it really kind of gives you that hospital kind of feel before you actually have to go out into the hospital, which is great. So in year 2, you're pretty much just continuing on with your hospital-based placements, and you'll also start your general practice or family medicine placement. And then in years 3 to 6, you're going to work through your clinical rotations. So, you know, general medicine, surgery, women's health, children's health, and so on. There are some placements in, and I said years 3 to 6, sorry, that's for students coming through the year 3 to 6 is talking about students coming through on the high school pathway. So for you guys who are coming in as grad students, this will refer more to your 3rd and 4th year. So again, in terms of selectives and composite format programs, you can do some of these in different places. So you don't have to just do the regular hospital rotations, you know, around the Gold Coast or, you know, whatever city we send you to nearby. You can actually do a rural placement. So rural medicine, obviously really important in Canada, just as it is in Australia. So you can do a rural medicine placement. You can go international. So you can do, if you'd like to do a placement in Papua New Guinea, again, really different experience, like a great way to kind of give you a full spectrum view of medicine. And you can also do international placements back here in Canada. So if you wanted to get to know some people, kind of start networking in Canada before you actually come back, this is a great way to kind of do that. So if you look at doing some placements in Canada before you finish your program. So Pierre's just got a quick question here. So Pierre, there are all of our professors in medicine and our placement team do have connections in North America. So you can come to them with an idea of where you'd like to go if you know people or you have connections, but they will also do a lot of the work to help you out with organising your placements in Canada or in the US or wherever you'd like to go. So obviously we have a lot of partnerships around the world, so there are lots of opportunities there. I just mentioned Canada in particular because we do have a lot of Canadian students who like to have that option to kind of come back and start networking here before they complete their degree. So I'm just going to move into the students now who would be coming in directly from high school before we go any further. So if you're coming directly from high school, you would basically be doing the Bachelor of Medical Science first, and then you would pathway into the Doctor of Medicine that we just talked about. So basically the Bachelor of Medical Science is a 3-year program that's accelerated. So you actually finish it in 2 years. So in this case, trimester 3 is compulsory. So you will do 3 trimesters a year. As I mentioned before, with health science for undergrad medicine or graduate medicine, the intake is trimester 1. And for you in the undergrad program, you'll be coming in February. Now, the interesting thing with admissions in terms of the Bachelor of Medical Science is that it has a rolling admissions process for the undergrad program. So there's no hard closing date. We do suggest that you apply by September, okay, which shouldn't be a problem for students coming out of Canadian high schools, because normally you would have your transcripts by kind of June, probably July at the latest. So this is quite interesting because if you meet the requirements, the academic requirements for this program, and you get your application in first or early, you will be offered a place. So it's quite different to the MD. The MD, people are students are competing against each other. This is different. If you meet the requirement and there's a place open, you'll be offered a place for this one. So that's the good news for students coming straight out of high school. There are fewer quota places, just slightly fewer quota places for this program. So normally we divide the places for the Bachelor of Medical Science between the Gold Coast and Brisbane. If you're going to Brisbane, you'll be on the Nathan campus. So 10 places at each normally. If you start in Brisbane with the Bachelor of Medical Science, you will still have to move to the Gold Coast when you move into the Doctor of Medicine, because the Doctor of Medicine is only taught at the Gold Coast campus. Okay, so sometimes students will put, Bachelor of Medical Science Gold Coast as their first preference, and then Brisbane as their second preference. So, usually students are willing to go wherever they can get in. But certainly if you have a preference to just do the whole program at the Gold Coast, you can pick that when you apply. So the bad news for students coming straight from high school is that you need to have an extremely high GPA coming out of high school. So to get into the Bachelor of Medical Science, basically we're looking of course at your best 6 courses in year 12 in Ontario. We'll look at all year 12 courses for other provinces, and you need to have a minimum average for year 12 of about 94%. So 94 or better. As I said, if you meet this requirement of 94 and there's a place available, they will offer it to you. So you're not competing necessarily against a student who has a 97 or a 98. So that's kind of the good news in that respect, particularly for Canadians, because you will have your high school transcripts reasonably early. So basically the pathway is set. So if you enter the Bachelor of Medical Science, we will be holding a place for you in the Doctor of Medicine. So it's difficult to get into the Bachelor of Medical Science, but then you do not compete again for the Doctor of Medicine. So once you're in, that's it. The only thing we do ask is that you keep your GPA at a minimum of 5 out of 7. It's not too crazy. It's about a B+ average. And you need to, there's one course in the Bachelor of Medical Science relating to human skills that you must pass, non-negotiable, because as I mentioned before, we are looking for very well-rounded students coming into the Doctor of Medicine. So you need to have those human skills down. Having said that, our Canadian students do not generally have any issue with this human skills course. Okay, so why would you want to study medicine at Griffith? So I mentioned before that we are a pretty young program. That also makes us very innovative. And we do have, as I mentioned, state-of-the-art facilities. So yeah, pretty much everything you could want is in that health centre. It's basically the university, when they decided to build it, they went basically to the academic staff and asked them, you know, if you could teach medicine in any way, what would that look like? And then they put that into the facilities. We even have green rooms for the actors who come in and play your patients in those simulations. So they've pretty much thought of everything. As I mentioned, there is a big focus on the human dimension of medicine, and that appeals to a lot of our Canadian students. So if that sounds good to you, this will be a good fit for you. We are also world leaders at Griffith in using simulated activities. So we do obviously a lot of work, as I mentioned, with actors playing real patients, but we also use SimBots. Yeah, there's a lot of different simulated activities. In the video as well, you saw our virtual pharmacy projected onto the wall. So there's a lot of a real kind of integration of technology into what you'd be doing at Griffith, and a lot of, I think the whole ethos with the health science programs is that you get a real world kind of experience and you're basically prepared for when you go into a hospital. Lots of problem-based learning, lots of group work, so you will really get to know the other students well. You'll really definitely move through the program as a pretty tight-knit cohort. As I said, there will be interdisciplinary work, so you do a lot of casework where you're working with the other health professionals, not just other medical students. We do have internationalization leads at Griffith as well, and this is true, of course, for medicine. So in terms of what this means for you, we do have particular professors who basically overlook the international cohort of students within the bigger cohort. So they will basically, you know, check in with you all the time, organize, you know, sometimes some specific social activities for you and that kind of stuff. So yeah, they're really, really great. The other thing with medicine at Griffith is you have the option to undertake a PhD at the same time as your MD. So you can't apply for your PhD when you apply for the MD, but when you're basically, once you get to second year of the MD program, you can then apply to do your PhD. So if you're thinking maybe you're interested in the research side of medicine as well as the practice, then that could be a great option for you. And that's the health centre building right there. The other thing I wanted to talk about was why you would study medicine in Australia. Now, in Canada, we know that there's a shortage of places in Canadian universities, so that's obviously, you know, a big reason for you. But you can also feel really good and confident about studying in Australia when you're studying medicine. So for Canadians coming back to Canada for residency, we have the best match rate of any country where students study outside of Canada. So that's huge. So you know that what you're being taught in Australia is applicable to Canada and that you will compete well. Medical graduates in Australia are very well regarded because our education system is very good. And like Canada, we have a very similar education and medical system. You also have the option to apply to do your residency in Australia. So if you want to apply to do your residency in Canada, that's fine. But if you don't get in, you can also look at Australia as another option. What we're actually finding now, and it's been an interesting kind of change in the last few years, is that more and more Canadians are not even applying to match in Canada. They're just applying in Australia. Last year, there were actually vacancies in Australia. So it's currently a very different situation to what's happening in Canada. but of course you can apply for both. We do offer a post-study work permit in Australia as well. So usually if you're studying a program of at least 2 years, sorry, just before I get onto that, Ekaterina's just asking, can you apply for a PhD and then switch to an MD? Generally, if you're looking at medicine, you need to apply for medicine, get into medicine, and get into your second year before you can look at a PhD. You could potentially, I do know students sometimes, I've met quite a few who are already doing their PhD when they come and talk to me about looking at doing medicine. So it is possible. You'll certainly compete very well academically if you have a master's or a PhD under your belt before applying, for sure. So yeah, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Pira's just asking, is the PhD option combined with the MD program, or does it require an additional 4 years? No, you're kind of doing it at the same time, Pira. It adds a little bit of time to your program, but it's not like doing another full 4 years, if that makes sense. Okay, post-study work permit in Australia. So if you do at least 2 years in Australia, you do have the option to apply for a 2-year post-study work permit. One of the great things about studying with Griffith at the Gold Coast is that if you study at the Gold Coast, you can actually apply for a 3-year post-study work permit. So gives you some extra time. Doctors are usually always on the skilled migration list. So of course, you know, we can't guarantee that you will necessarily get a job, but doctors are usually high in demand on that list. The list does change every year, but you'll generally find doctors are there time and time again. The other good thing about medicine in Australia is if you do come back to Canada, there's only one additional step that Canadians don't do that you would have to do to register in Canada, and that's just one extra exam. But everything else, the whole process that you would follow coming back to Canada is the same as Canadians who are studying medicine in Canada, just one more exam. So the application process is pretty straightforward. Of course, you can apply directly through Griffith, but I would recommend applying through KOM Consultants. Of course, if you're on this webinar, you've probably already been in touch with them quite a bit before. So they basically take all of these steps and just make everything a lot simpler. We've been working with them for a really long time at Griffith, so they're very well aware of Griffith's entry requirements, what kind of documents you need for application, all of that kind of stuff. So I would definitely get in touch with the team at KOM if you are interested in submitting an application. Another wonky slide. Okay. So everybody wants to know about scholarships, of course. So there are a bunch of different options for scholarships. Most of our scholarships at Griffith are based on academic excellence, which is generally really good for health sciences students because you guys are usually high achieving students. So there are a lot. There are some scholarships that are specific to health sciences. So there'll be entry scholarships for students in medicine, dentistry, and a number of other health sciences. You can also apply for, if you're coming in as an undergrad student, there are some international high school leaver scholarships. If you're coming in as a grad student, there's another grad student scholarship. I think it's about 25% off tuition fees for your program. You can also apply for the Remarkable Scholarship, which is the largest one at Griffith. And I say one, but there are many given out through each trimester every year. And the Remarkable Scholarship is actually a 50% tuition discount. So, and that's for the entire program. So yeah, that's huge. When you go on the Griffith website, so you'll see down here near the picture, we've got the website for international scholarships. And if you forget it, don't worry, just ask myself or someone at KOM. But yeah, if you go on to that page, you can actually search scholarships by nationality. by the country where you've done your most recent study, by program level, by study area, whether you're a commencing student or continuing student. It will drop down all scholarships that might be applicable to you. It will also show you what the deadlines are for each trimester. So for students in medicine, it's not such a big deal because you're always doing a trimester 1 intake, but it will tell you what the trimester 1 intake deadline is. I don't think they're up at the moment for, yeah, they would have just already passed a cycle. So for you guys looking at trimester 1, like if you're looking to apply for trimester 1 2021, you need to have a look on the website in around about August, September. And that will be enough time for you to kind of have a look at, you know, what you need to do and what the deadline is. Deadlines are normally for trimester 1, they're normally around kind of October, November. The other thing with finance is, of course, on your student visa in Australia, you can work. So you'll be able to work about 20 hours per week during your study period, and you can work full-time during any breaks. The other thing is we find, I mean, most Canadian students, you know, finance is really a puzzle. So students are, you know, applying for scholarships. They're also bringing, you know, maybe some personal savings, or maybe somebody in your family can help you out a little bit. You can also bring provincial loans. So the provincial loans, you know, similar to OSAP in Ontario or any of the other ones, they also offer loans for international study. So that will also help towards your study in Australia. You can bring loans and lines of credit from Canadian banks as well. And a lot of the banks, particularly the big 4 banks, basically are very familiar with students studying in Australia. They're very familiar with the amounts that you require, how much your program costs, that kind of thing. Couple of questions here. For high school entry, first 2 years, all 3 semesters are compulsory. Yes, all 3 semesters are compulsory, or trimesters. You will get a little bit of a break in between trimesters, but you're just not going to get that gigantic summer break that you would get if you were studying another program. Obviously, it's not medicine. So you get a little bit of break, but not a big summer break. We're really trying to help you accelerate so then you can finish your entire medicine program in 6 years. Are there opportunities to work as a research assistant at your university? Yes, there are also lots of opportunities to work on campus at Griffith, and certainly in research, if you've already got some experience, you might be able to look at that. Definitely when you meet with, you know, your professors and tutors and so on, definitely let them know that you're interested in that kind of work. Are there any changes because of COVID? Not at the moment, because all of the health science programs begin in trimester 1. We're still just going through the application kind of process as normal. So the only difference is for medicine and dentistry as well, they are extending the application deadlines. So as I said, we don't know exactly yet when that will be. We'll keep the staff at KOM up to date, and they will update you. But it's probably for medicine, we're looking at probably July or August, it's looking like as the deadline for medicine. It's still, you know, trimester 1 next year is still a long way off, and the situation is changing day by day. So at this stage, we're still looking at going ahead as normal with our 2021 intake for medicine. And we will certainly let you know, you know, if anything changes along the way. A lot of it will depend on the government's travel restrictions, whether you guys can get out of Canada, whether the Australian borders are open by that stage. But again, it's just an, you know, kind of ever-changing situation. So I can tell you one thing and then it'll be totally different in a week. So I don't want to, you know, give you inaccurate information. So just keep in touch. And, you know, obviously you guys are going to apply through KOM, so keep in touch with them because they will have the most up-to-date information from the university. DJ's just asking about the deadline for dentistry. So at the moment, it looks like the deadline for dentistry will also be extended a little bit. Again, we're just waiting for confirmation from the school. It's normally July 31st. I think they may be thinking about extending it into August. So again, keep up to date with KOM. On that same topic, I will be talking about dentistry and other health science programs in May. So you can go to the KOM webinar page to look at the dates for those. I think I'm doing graduate options for dentistry and other health programs on May 4th and the direct entry from high school on May 6th. But go to the KOM website. Yes, so Ekaterina's asking about MCAT. Yes, we did cover that earlier for the MD. So it's required MCAT scores and interview plus your GPA are required for the MD program. If you're coming into the Bachelor of Medical Science, you only need grades, okay? Because you're coming directly out of high school. We don't expect you to do the MCAT. We don't expect you to do an interview. So you do need a super high GPA to come in from high school. But on the upside, you don't need to interview and you don't need to do the MCAT. And then as long as you pass your program, your Bachelor of Medical Science, you are assured a place in the MD. Again, we talked about work while you can study. So just to clarify, the work permit is built into your student visa. So you don't need to apply for anything aside from your job. You just go and apply for a job as normal. And we do have Uni Temps, which is a service on campus that will actually help to link you to employers while you're studying. The good thing about Uni Temps is that aside from the fact they have a lot of connections with different employers, they will also help you to find an employer that will work around your study schedule, which is really important, particularly with medicine, because you're pretty busy. Just another thing going back to cost. So we did talk about the cost of the program at the beginning. Another thing to keep in mind is that there are other costs of studying in Australia. So obviously you have your tuition fees, you have your visa application fee. So currently it's about $650 to apply for your student visa. And then you need to get overseas student health cover as well, OSHC. So this is not a Griffith requirement, it's an Australian government requirement. All international students must have health coverage. And I think at the moment, OSHC runs at about $600 per year. Then of course you'll have your flights. So yeah, keep an eye out on those deals going out from Vancouver. You'll have cost of living, which we'll talk a little bit about in a second. And then depending on your personal situation, you may have, you know, all sorts of different costs. I think with medicine, mostly the additional costs are in terms of a couple of equipment requirements. So things like stethoscope and scrubs, but they're usually the only kind of big additional, or not even that big, but additional kind of requirements. So this gives you an idea of the cost of living. We are fortunate in that Gold Coast particularly has been ranked as the most affordable student city in Australia. So that's fantastic. Brisbane is also relatively cheap, particularly compared to Sydney and Melbourne. Sydney and Melbourne are more like Vancouver, Toronto prices. So cost of living is generally pretty good. So if you're coming to Queensland, the only thing to keep in mind, of course, is that no matter what, you know, any university tells you about the cost of living, the Australian government does require you to have an access to a minimum of about $20,000 per year to meet your living costs. So you don't have to have all that money up front, but, you know, they can see that you have a bank loan or your parents are helping you out or something like that. We do have accommodation on campus as well. So both Nathan and Gold Coast campuses do have university villages. At Griffith, we don't do dorm style accommodation, we do apartment style. So you would be essentially sharing an apartment with some other students. You'd have your own bedroom, but you're sharing your living and kitchen areas. So that's one option for accommodation. Also it is self-catered because you do have a fully equipped kitchen. You would be basically shopping for your own food and cooking it or eating out, whatever you want to do. You can also look for accommodation off campus, particularly if you're coming into the MD program. You know, as a graduate student, you may not want to live on campus with kind of lots of first-year Australian students and, you know, American study abroad students, that kind of thing. But you can look at accommodation options off campus. So we do have a list of preferred partners on the Griffith website, and I can certainly help direct you to that. But you can also use all of these websites listed here to find accommodation, and that's both places that you can lease and also will also give you access to people who already have a lease, but they're just looking for people to share. Is housing guaranteed for med students? Not really, but we don't really have a problem with accommodation. We're one of those universities that's actually lucky enough to have plenty of accommodation for our students, so we don't really guarantee it. We also find that most of our medical students, again, particularly if you're coming in as a grad student straight into the MD, you probably don't want to live on campus. It's a different, like the on-campus living situation is quite geared towards undergraduates, I would say. And, you know, as a grad student, you're kind of usually in a different stage of life. Now, on-campus accommodation can accommodate you. You can apply for a different type of room for a grad student, but yeah, a lot of our students do tend to look for other options, or what you might want to do is stay on campus for the first trimester and then move off campus after that once you've met some people. Yep, here is just talking about the KOMs matching for residency for Australian graduates coming back to Canada. Yes, so Australia, generally, I think a couple of years ago, we were about 58–60% match rate. I think more recently, it's about a 50% match rate for students coming back to Canada. However, keep in mind that a lot of students choose not to come back to Canada. So as I mentioned before, a lot of students are now saying, I'm not even going to bother trying to match with Canada. I'm just going to try apply for the Australian one, do my residency in Australia, and then look at coming back to Canada later. So you can, you know, obviously go either way. You can go for one, you can go for the other, you can go for both. Yeah, I would say keep your options open for sure. Okay. We do offer a free airport trip pickup for all of our new students as well. So most likely you're flying into Brisbane Airport because it's kind of the biggest international airport in Queensland. But it doesn't matter whether you're going to study in Brisbane or at the Gold Coast. We'll pick you up and we'll take you there. You just have to book it on the website at least 72 hours before you plan on arriving. There's lots of great student life at Griffith as well. So we've talked a lot about the program and kind of the academics, academic side of things, but there is great student life as well. There's, you know, over 150 different clubs and societies. There's lots of, you know, market days and activities always kind of going on around campus. So definitely no shortage of things to do outside of the classroom. And this is actually the Aquatic Centre and Gym at the Gold Coast campus. Obviously in here, you know, a lot of people will be using the weights rooms. There are a lot of classes going on as well. So if you want to take fitness classes, you can do that. You can use the pool. This pool is also used for entertainment. So if we're running any kind of like movie night, we'll often do an outdoor or several outdoor movie nights through the summer. So it's definitely a nice place to relax. We do have a large Canadian student presence on campus as well, particularly at the Gold Coast. That's where the majority of our Canadians go. Sometimes students will go to Brisbane as well, but there's quite a few on campus at the Gold Coast. So definitely a good way to touch base with your Canadian cohort is to check out the Canadian Students Association. These guys, as well as lots of other groups, will run a lot of activities during orientation as well. So you'll have a lot of opportunities to meet them. And of course, you'll often meet each other a little bit, at least online, before you actually head off to Australia as well. We have the Griffith Mates as well. So this is a group, this is like a peer support network. So these guys run lots of different activities throughout the year. As I said, they will have activities running through orientation as well, so they get to know you. But you can join up with any of their activities throughout the year. Lots of free stuff. They do a lot of free things. They also do quite a few activities around volunteering. So if you're interested in kind of giving back to the community, doing some volunteering, they are definitely a great help in finding those opportunities. And they also offer an international student buddy program as well. So if you're interested in kind of being linked up one-on-one with someone, not just the whole group, they can help you organise that. And there's other dedicated support, of course, at Griffith. We do have an international student advisory that is specific to international students. So you'll have all the normal supports of any student at Griffith, but we do supply a number of extra supports for you, because sometimes students from other countries are going through different issues, particularly around visas and that kind of thing, that our domestic students don't have to deal with. And there's lots of health and wellbeing services available for students as well. Obviously physical health is important, but mental health is very important too. We have a doctor, nurse, psychiatrist regularly on campus, and we do have counselling services as well. So, of course, if you have any questions, you can contact the team at KOM. And you can also feel free to reach out to me directly if you have some more questions about Griffith or Australia in general. I've got my email there. You can also call or text me. You can also check me out on Instagram. And I'm on Skype as Genki Aussie. I'm on Skype pretty regularly, so you can find me there. I'm also running a bunch of Zoom drop-in sessions throughout April and May as well. So if you want the links for particular dates, just let me know. But yeah, that's basically a situation where I'll be sitting on Zoom and you just click on the link for that date and come in and have a chat. You don't have to book anything, I'll just be there. You can also connect with Griffith more generally on all the major social media channels as well. And I'm just going to show you one more video just to give you a bit more of an idea about the environment and Griffith in general.
Peaceful walks in sunset talks, blissful explosion lights the sky. The moment of clarity is sharp as glass. The beauty it draws me in. Love changes everything,
So that's it from me, guys. Thank you again so much for dropping in today. I'm going to be here for another few minutes, so please feel free to type in some more questions using the chat function. And please let me know if you have any other questions. Just contact me at any time. Very happy to help you out. I'll just pop my contact details back up there. Yeah, so a Maths B, when we talk about Math B, I should clarify too that medicine, the only real hard requirement now is Year 12 English, but there is an assumed knowledge of Math B or, and a science. So that can be physics, chemistry, or biology. Maths B is generally equivalent to your higher level Canadian school maths. So things like pre-calculus generally is what you would be looking for. So pre-calculus, if you've done calculus and algebra, of course, those would cover off on Maths B as well. DJ's just got a question here. So with applications for dentistry, will classes for new students maybe be expected to be online? Yeah, DJ, it's really hard to say at this stage because, yeah, I mean, again, dentistry also starts in trimester 1. So there's no trimester 2 or 3 start dates for medicine or dentistry. So at this stage, we're still expecting that trimester 1, 2021 will go ahead as normal on campus. But again, definitely keep in touch with me, keep in touch with the staff at KOM, because this information, will change definitely over the next, weeks and months. And yeah, I don't want to tell you something now that's going to be, completely inaccurate, in a couple of weeks or months. So there's still a long time until trimester 1. So all I can say now is that we are still expecting it to go ahead as normal. For Australian residency, are placements generally merit-based for international students, or is it ideal to have some sort of connection? You don't necessarily have to have a connection, but you'll already have connections just by being in the program, because you'll be doing your clinical rotations primarily in Australia. Of course, you do have the option to do a couple in other countries. But primarily you'll be working in Australian hospitals. So you'll already be starting to build up a network that way. So yeah, that will definitely work to your advantage. DJ, I'm not quite sure what you mean there by the science courses. So I think you're talking about entry requirements. So yeah, the only hard one now is Year 12 English, but you do need to have they assume that you have a knowledge of. And yeah, if you're going into medicine, generally you will have studied a higher level math or a science. You don't need 3 sciences, you can have 1. They'll just assume that you have studied a science. So it could be bio, could be chem, physics, yeah, anything. Clinical rotations throughout Australia are focused in Queensland. Primarily, you'll be somewhere in Queensland or New South Wales. That's generally where your clinical rotations will be. But again, depending on the situation, where there are places, you may move elsewhere. You may even have a request. If you know somebody elsewhere, you may be able to request with the clinical placement staff that you go to another state. Ekaterina is asking about lectures being recorded. Yeah, so most of our lectures at Griffith obviously are done live, but they're also recorded. So we do, once you become a student at Griffith, you get access to what's called My Griffith portal. So you will have access through there to all the course materials for your different courses each trimester, as well as lecture recordings. So yeah, lectures are generally recorded. Tutorials, not really, it's more of a discussion. But yeah, lectures are, so you can kind of go over and over that information as needed, because we know, people learn in different ways. So sometimes, it just doesn't stick in class and you need to go over it in your own time, or sometimes you just need to go over something particular in the lecture. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff. You'll notice at Griffith, a lot of stuff is based online. Yeah, which is good. It kind of gives you the opportunity to learn in different ways. Any other questions? Okay, so is part-time research work manageable with medicine workload during the first 2 years? Okay, so talking about the first 2 years of the MD, I think you're talking about. Yes, some students, I know students who work throughout their medical program. It depends on, I guess, how well you manage your time and what type of student you are. You have to be pretty organized to do that, I will say. A lot of students, do part-time work, but there are a lot of others who do not. So it kind of depends on you and how you, can manage your time. Obviously, medicine is a pretty intensive program. So, you need to kind of, I think at first you definitely need to see how you're coping with the workload before you try to take on anything additional. Sruthi, I'm not quite sure what you mean by hardships. I'm not quite sure what you mean there. Maybe you want to clarify that. We don't, in general, I don't get many complaints from our Canadian students about studying medicine in Australia. Medicine is hard, like it just is. As I said, it's an intensive program. A lot is expected of you. You have to take in a lot of information really quickly. So the program is hard in general, I would say. That's mostly what students just grumble about the normal stuff involved in studying, right? Like we've all been there. It's it's hard and there's stresses, obviously, with a program like medicine. But I do think one of the nice things about the program at Griffith is that there's a lot of leaning on each other. So you're doing a lot of group work, particularly around, kind of those preclinical kind of simulated placements. But yeah, in general, like the group is pretty close knit. I know a lot of students organize study groups within the larger cohort that it's kind of helps to make the workload a bit more manageable and just gives you other people, to kind of lean on through the process. And also, all your professors know, the kind of stresses that you're going to face. And a lot of them were international students themselves. So they totally get it. They're very supportive. They're very accommodating as well. If you have, you need some flexibility or you have any kind of learning difficulty, that kind of thing, they're very happy to accommodate. Yeah, they're pretty supportive. Nicole's just asking about the size of the lecture classes for the MD versus dentistry. That's really hard to say, Nicole, because the classes change quite a bit as you move through the program. So usually in the first year, you're doing a lot of that kind of early, anatomy, that kind of stuff that you may also take with students who are not medical students. You may take some classes with students from other health sciences. So lectures, in those cases, you might be with the biggest, if you think about the intake for medicine, so we talked about the international intake being 30 students, and we would normally take in, maybe 100-ish, 120-ish domestic students as well. So generally that would be kind of the biggest class that you would come in contact with, is that sort of level. Occasionally, if you're in a class, with maybe some pharmacy students, for example, or some dentistry students, your lecture may be around 200, 250 students. But again, you've got the recordings, and the important thing to remember in Australia too is that our system is run similar to the UK. So we don't just do lectures, we do tutorials and clinical sessions, lab work, that kind of stuff. So yeah, so when you're doing things like if you're in an anatomy lab, for example, working with cadavers, you're obviously in a much, much smaller class, and then you're in small groups within that class. So yeah, it really depends on what kind of class you're doing. Yes, so Sruthi's asking about interaction between local and international students. Yeah, absolutely. So you guys will all be, you know, in the same class as the Australian students. There's no kind of separation. So yeah, you'll be in it together for sure. Yeah. So and at Griffith in general, as I mentioned earlier, we do have students from over 130 different nationalities. Our Australian students as well are all from a very diverse mix of backgrounds. So yeah, you'll find a very diverse student population, also in age. So in Australia, university is not only really for students coming straight from high school or doing a grad program straight after undergrad. You'll find that there are people who are learning throughout their careers, lifelong learners. Sometimes, particularly in medicine, we get students who are coming to us maybe, anywhere between 30 and 50 or 60 years old because they did something else because they had to, and then they wanted to come back to school later on to, pursue their passion for medicine. So it's a very diverse student group, and yeah, you'll be mixing with everybody. How many international students are generally interviewed for the MD program? So usually what they'll do is they'll look at the academics first. So they'll look at your GPA combined with your MCAT score. And then they will basically rank you according to those scores. And then they'll decide who they want to interview by then. Sometimes they will interview almost everybody who makes the list academically. It just depends on how they're going and how many places they may have to be filled. So as I said, they may interview, even though applications don't close generally until August, let's say. We're still, as I said, we're still waiting for the exact deadline, but it'll probably be July or August. They will actually often start interviewing in June. So if you've submitted your application early and they're like, oh, okay, they've met the criteria for academics, let's set up an interview. So yeah, they will often interview a lot of students, and they will kind of keep going if they have places left, like if it's getting, towards September, October, and they still have some places left, they will continue to interview students. They will go back and look at the list and look at who they haven't interviewed and look at interviewing those students. Yes, Ekaterina, you are right. You definitely need to get ready to study hard. I mean, it's medicine, right? Medicine is going to be challenging wherever you go. Interviews are on Skype. Yeah, so you're definitely not expected to travel to Australia just for an interview. No, that would be a bit much to ask. No, everything is on Skype. So that's great too. You don't have to feel like you're going to be disadvantaged because all of you will be interviewing via Skype. So yeah, there's no disadvantage. All right, so I think I will leave you now and let you get on with your day. Again, any questions, please contact KOM. They know a lot. They're in contact with us all the time. So thanks so much, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.